Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about market competition, competition of goods and services in the marketplace. Now, there have been a few think tank type articles that have been doing the rounds recently. Some you'd say were sort of on the right wing side of things, others on the left wing. The right wing preferring sort of market forces to decide outcomes, whereas the left wing preferring sort of central planned or socialist type policies to decide outcomes. Now, typically the Western economies are mixed economies where there's some elements of socialism, such as welfare, that sort of thing, and some elements of market forces. Increasingly with the globalist ideology, more and more of the economy and the arrangements in it are being centrally planned. For example, the forced mass migration of people to the West, artificially lower wages, the artificial pumping up of residential real estate, family homes by international investment. These are all planned moves rather than any form of natural market forces. And also we look at, what's the size of a market? Is the market the whole world? Is a market the local area? Is it the local town or city or village? What is the market? Is it a market within a nation state or within a trading bloc and so on and so forth? So these are decisions and determinations and definitions that have never really been settled, and the line sort of shifts constantly in some of these areas. Now, in the centrally planned economies, so say an example would be the Soviet Union. The centrally planned economies, assuming you start with a peasant society where you've got masses of very poor people living on the land, living sort of by barter and hand to mouth, that sort of thing, then you can improve the living standards of those people quite easily, socialism. But once you hit a sort of, the lower end of the midpoint, then it gets much, much harder to improve the quality of life of people. And almost no one's invested in, no one has a future because everyone's working for the benefit of everyone else rather than for their own benefits. So the quality of buildings and things are very poor. You've only got one choice of raincoat and one colour, things like this, a very limited number of shoes. Now, this prevents wastage on fashion type things, but it also creates waste. Central planning creates vast amounts of wastage in other areas, such as unproductive, unprofitable pursuits will be continued for ideological reasons. And therefore there'll be huge wastage in the sort of things that are produced and spoilage of, say, things like wheat and produce and so on. The Soviet Union used to produce, for most part, enough food, but given so much of it was spoiled in poor storage conditions, inadequate storage conditions, poor transport, you name it. And inability to transfer it to where people needed the product to the buyers, then it became they needed to import vast amounts of foodstuffs, including grain, because they couldn't feed their own people. Whereas they technically at least had easily enough to do it, if it had been better managed and not ideologically managed. Now, the argument on the free market is that the free market, in the free and the voluntary interaction of buyers and sellers and investors and workers and employers, that these free interactions will create a natural equilibrium, and that equilibrium will be the max point of a maximum efficiency, which will therefore produce the least wastage, the most productive output, and on that basis, it will create the maximum amount of well-being for the people in that economy. The socialist side of things is that in the free market, there are winners and losers. There are people who are capable of harder work, who are brighter, smarter, more motivated, more industrious, more conscientious, so on and so on. And those people will disproportionately benefit in a free market economy because they're prepared to work harder, prepared to take more risks or whatever the case may be. Whereas in a socialist economy, it's assumed that if you can create more or less, can create equal outcomes, and people will share the available resources equally, and therefore you'll have a more equitable society. It doesn't work out that way, because the ideological masters in any economy, and if it's socialist, it's ideological. Any of the ideological sort of masters and high priests of the ideology will be rewarded far more handsomely than someone who isn't important to the ideology. So a school teacher that indoctrinates children will be quite well looked after by the state, whereas a doctor that heals people is viewed as being ideologically is viewed as being of much lesser value to the ideology. Therefore, the school teacher gets paid a lot more than the doctor. The activist journalist that writes all sorts of bullshit propaganda is considered far more highly than the manager of the factory that puts out essential, technical equipment or so on. So again, the economy takes on ideological proportions, where the least economically productive people, if they're in the business of being ideologically important, then they're paid quite handsomely, even though they do no productive work, because the ideology takes precedence over anything else. So. But coming now to this, I've noticed a couple of papers coming out of right-wing think tanks where they say, let's get back to market forces. Now, I am a believer, by the way, in market forces and market signals. The trouble is, over what area and over what time span do you use that, and at what point should the government, if at all, intervene? So, and I've got a lot of years, decades in the private sector, and I'm someone who's acutely aware of price signals and how you have to respond to them. For example, the company I work for developed a technology that sort of really had cut ahead of the market on this, or cut ahead of the pack, and because of the quality of the product and its availability and this sort of thing, we were able to ask for and get very substantial profits. We had almost no competition. We just got that 6 month, 9 month jump on the pack and could make a lot of money. And we didn't know how long that benefit, that position of advantage would exist. How long would it be for someone else? We knew someone else would catch up, but we didn't know how long it would be and how effective or efficient they'd be once they did technically catch up. Would their production be up to it? Was their distribution system worthwhile? What price would they, and so on. So we had that, and I don't know, about 9 months or something after we got that lead on the market, a competitor did come out. Not quite as good product, but it was that they were prepared to cut the prices. So we found that they were coming in at something like 35%, give or take, below our prices. And people were saying, customers saying, well, look, your product's better and we do like it, but for a 35% difference, we're going to have to go with the other guy. So we had no choice. We had to respond to the market signals. We had to drop our price. Now, we'd also had other plans about how many people we're going to hire, and we're going to open up another factory or this or that or the next thing. And we realized with that loss of profit, in other words, having to compete with the other guys, we couldn't open up a new factory. We couldn't hire all these extra people. So we had to rejig our whole program. Now, we could have gone ahead with the other factory, and maybe the company had gone bankrupt or something, but we had to substantially readjust it based on those market forces. And we realistically said, well, other players will come into the market as well. The trend in prices is probably down. So we need to look at cost cutting on this and other efficiencies in order to be able to compete in that segment of the market. This was a high tech sort of segment. So we had to respond. So that's an example of responding to market force. We could have ignored the market forces. And if we had no competition, there were no market forces to respond to. You could have things like quality, where the customer would say, well, your product isn't good enough quality, or the quality's dropping. That you could respond to. But in terms of pricing, profits, reinvestment, and how to grow the business and the pathways to grow the business, those had to respond to market signals. So we couldn't really ignore it, and we didn't. So that was a case of quick response. Now, it surprised me over the years how many businesses do not respond. This is in the private sector, do not respond to market forces. They sort of look, oh well, you know, this is sort of an unpleasant reality, so I'll just filter it out of my head and keep on going. And then those are the businesses, of course, that go bankrupt or go to the brink and then stare into the abyss and have to be rescued at the last minute. But let's just have a look at this market forces. I don't think anyone's ever got the balance sort of perfect or right exactly. And the more planned type economies, the more planning and central planning, and the higher the taxation and the redistribution and the ideological efforts to create equal aid, the more that happens, the less new wealth is created. And in the West now, there's so little new wealth being created that everything is being patched up by debt and loans and so on, rather than productive wealth creation. So we're probably closer now to a socialist economy in the West than maybe it's ever been, or certainly in the modern industrial era anyway. Now, this is something the globalists have no problem with, because the globalists are imposing a new ideological sort of way of doing things. You'll own nothing and be happy. You'll be allocated income and you'll be told what you can spend it on. So we're being turned into serfs, medieval serfs, where the people at the apex, 1 in every 500 or so people, will own all the wealth. Their wealth will be guaranteed by monopolies, cartels, oligopolies, and so on. And then they will give a portion of that guaranteed wealth away to the peasant serf masses. And that's the new ideological order they're heading towards. And they've been reasonably successful at it so far. They've been getting away with it, certainly. But I just want to look at what is the right balance, or if there's even a right balance, and where do you... So here's the issue. Okay, so let's use a little village, and there are 4 bakers baking bread in the village, and they're all selling, about the same bread. They've got sort of a quarter of the market each, and out of the 100 consumers in the market, they've got roughly 25 each. Now, so one baker decides that they're going to stay up until late at night, for example, or go up earlier in the morning, and they may attract more business as a result. So the other bakers have to also adjust that. Now that means that consumers have now got wider choice. They can shop at other hours, so they don't have to rush to the shop when they finish work or before they go to work. So they now can buy other things. So now the level of service available to the consumer is improved, so people are better off. In other terms, quality of life means they're not getting stressed and running to buy the bread in the first thing. Those sort of things. Let's say another instance here is one baker has got a new recipe now for bread, and that makes the bread taste better. And because of the new recipe, he can actually sell it for a penny less than the guys up the road or the guys around the corner. So he comes out of that new bread. As a result, some of the other bakers start going out of business. The guy on the far side of the village says, "Look, my business isn't going to hold up for much longer. Why don't you buy my business?" And then you've got the whole village, end to end. You've got the whole village sewn up, so that suddenly one of the bakers, he's got a better product at a better price. He has innovated and he has engaged in free market transactions with willing buyers for his bread at the price he's selling it at. So suddenly the bakers, this baker has a monopoly in the village. He's got no competition. So now at what point here does the government need to say, well, that monopoly is no good, it'll create bad behavior, which it will create bad. So what does the government do? Does it artificially prop up competition? Does it fine the guy with a monopoly? Does it let market forces run their course over what may be years? Because the consumer is going to get screwed in the meantime. Workers are going to be paid less. Do you really want this? Do they go to a baker at the nearby town and say, listen, why don't you open up a bakery in, a successful baker in the nearby town? Why don't you open up a bakery in this village because there's none other? Do they wait for that baker to work out do that? Has he got enough money? Do you have a special loan to another baker to create competition? So so at what point does the government intervene, and how much? Do they tell the baker, listen, buddy, you've got a monopoly, you've got to shut down your bakery because you're a monopoly? Again, this becomes how do you balance these factors out? The guy he's got a monopoly in the village now, not for any bad things he did. He created a better product at a better price. That's how free market works, for Christ's sake. All his customers are voluntarily entering into a commercial arrangement with him to buy his buy the bread he bakes, and they're happy with it. Otherwise, they wouldn't buy it. But now he's a monopoly, so the baker thinks, well, holy shit, I've got no competition now. So I'll increase the price of my bread because people have got nowhere else to go, and I'm paying some pretty good staff here, really sort of competent and skilled staff here. We're paying them good money previously because I wanted to be the best baker in town. Now I'm the best baker in town, and I'm paying these skilled people above the premium here to get the best people, so I could be the best baker in town. But I don't need them anymore. I don't have to compete anymore, so I don't need those skilled. So I'm going to tell them that I'm going to cut their pay by 25%, and if they don't like that, they can get fucked. So I'm going to get rid of them, and if that's okay, so they go. I can now get cheap labour. I can now get cheap labour, low skilled labour that I don't have to pay much to. I've got no competition, so I can produce an inferior product, and I can charge more for it because these people got nowhere else to go. So this is the impact of monopoly, oligopoly, cartel, whatever you want to call it, is that you get lower quality product at a higher price, and also you get lower wages because the baker doesn't need skilled people anymore. And we're seeing that now, that same architecture view all across the West. Not that they've achieved this through being the best in the market. Far from it. It's been a process of governments favouring certain businesses and giving them lucrative contracts and not favouring others. Then the others go to business. That creates the monopoly and so on. But the flow-on effect of higher prices, paying lower wages, not needing skilled labour, that's the paradigm that the Western world is now in, very, very much so, by the way. So, but where does the government intervene in this, or any how do you correct this? The guy has legitimately become a monopoly by having the best product at the best price. Why is that? That's market forces at their best. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, it may be a year or 2 years, or fuck knows how long, before another baker works out that, hey, there's an opportunity here. This guy's producing an inferior product to high price. I'm gonna open up a bakery. Or again, some baker from another city or town decides, hey, this place is right for. But and that will, over time, there will be an element of equilibrium there. But that's, how do you look at that time frame and the fallout in the meantime between, do you have a national price? Say bread must be this or that price, and force the baker to sell at a certain price. He goes, well, screw you. I'm not going to have the government telling me what to do. I had to bust my ass for years coming up with that new recipe to produce that new bread to become the biggest baker in town. So I'm not going to have the government telling me what to do. So now I'm going to employ black lesbians from fucking Bangladesh or something like that in my bakery. So screw you, Jack. I'll pay you back in other ways. I'll get back at you in other ways. So getting that balance in the marketplace, right, is not easy. And the last thing you want is some ideological fanatic of a bureaucrat coming in there and doing it. They'll only fuck it up even worse. But no matter how good their intentions may be, they'll fuck it up. So when we're looking at the idea of the socialist economy and the planned socialist economy, or market forces, how do we determine how they work? Now, really, you can look at a national economy with a national population, and then you've got some sort of gauge of how you make things, what is equitable and what is practical and what works and what is sensible and so on. And you don't have that once you start engaging or allowing outside interference. For example, allowing business to say, well, we don't want to pay the wages that the local workers want. Oh, that's not a problem. We'll just import millions of brown and black peasants from the third world. That'll fix it. So that artificially disrupts the natural market forces. So my point is that market signals, to what extent they do exist, are either being ignored or willfully bypassed. And I think we have to get back to market signals. Now, to what extent we can debate, but at the moment, the entire economy is working absent of market signals or absent of a proper response to market signals. For example, we've got a shortage of doctors. Okay, well, let's train more doctors. No. Why do we have to train doctors? We can get doctors from Bangladesh. They're not too good, those doctors in Bangladesh. Who gives a fuck? They're doctors. We'll just give a lower quality of medical care to our citizens. Problem solved. But is it? Because the consumer is not choosing to say, well, I don't really want to see that doctor. Well, if you don't see that doctor, you're not allowed to see any doctor. And by the way, if you don't see that doctor from Bangladesh, you're a fucking racist, fascist Nazi. So, so again, these are artificial interferences in what would have been natural market forces. Now, the natural market forces for medicine are to keep improving the quality of the doctors and the nurses, medical personnel, to keep improving that quality. But once you inject ideology, heavy doses of ideology into it, then you're going in reverse. You're saying, well, the quality of the service doesn't matter as long as we've got that ideological overhang there. And I think that's where we are now in the West. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.